evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The US halts student visa appointments as the Trump administration looks at expanding social media screening of applicants. A US embassy spokesperson says students can continue to submit visa applications and scheduled appointments will not be affected. India and the US likely to sign the first tranche of a trade deal by the last week of June. The director of US Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, says India is close to the finish line.
It could be India's moment. I think that certainly all supply chains are being reinvestigated by the firms that run them.
Former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan says this could be India's moment if it lays out the red carpet to draw foreign direct investment with proactive policies. Adds India must use trade negotiations wisely to seize the opportunity. That's an exclusive. SEBI passes an ex parte interim order in the IndusInd Bank insider trading case, finds prima facie violations by 5 banking executives, including the former CEO Sumant Katpalia, orders impounding nearly 20 crore rupees, bars all 5 executives from the market till further orders. Former SEBI chief Madhavi Puri Butch and her husband get a clean chit. The anti-corruption ombudsman, the Lokpal, terms the allegations palpably unfounded and devoid of merit. SEBI approves Hero FinCorp's IPO, is expected to give the green light to HDB Financial's 12,500 crore rupee issue soon. This could be the largest NBFC listing in recent times. British American Tobacco trims its stakeholding in ITC with a sale of shares worth over 12,000 crore rupees. This comes a day after another 12,000 crore rupees stake sale in Indigo by co-founder Rakesh Gangwal as promoters continue to cash in. The government hikes the minimum support price for Kharif crops by 7% compared to last year. Ragi gets the highest hike of 14%. The government also imposes stock limits on wheat. The co-founders of edtech firm Unacademy set to exit the company. Sources say Gaurav Munjal and Roman Seni are in talks with the board to spin off the language learning app AirLearn as a separate company.
We want to build a legacy company. We don't want to be valuation chasers. We want to be legacy chasers.
We're chasing legacy, not valuation, say the founders of PhonePe as they aim to build a digital conglomerate. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive. Well, let's go straight to the top story this evening. US President Donald Trump has ordered embassies to stop scheduling new appointments for student visas. Now, Indians account for close to 30% of the international student community in the United States. The Trump administration is preparing to implement comprehensive social media screening for all international applicants. The US Embassy told CNBC TV 18 that students can continue to submit applications, but the appointment process for interviews is dynamic. Scheduled appointments are expected to go ahead as planned. Just yesterday, the US Embassy in New Delhi had cautioned Indian students against skipping classes or dropping out of their program without informing their respective schools. The embassy warned students that who resort to such actions could have their visas revoked, and this may be rendered ineligible for further visas. The US Education Secretary Linda McMahon said that President Trump has concerns that there are foreign students who come into the US to create unrest. Take a look.
The president certainly had great concerns that there are foreign students, not everyone, but there are foreign students who come to this country, I do believe, who help create this unrest. There are activists who come in. I think there are professors that are hired and brought in who are teaching ideology more than they are the subject matter that perhaps parents who are sending their students to these universities expect. I don't know what the criteria that the State Department is looking at. I'll leave that up to them. But certainly having an understanding of what students are coming into our country, what professors are being hired, what their backgrounds or ideologies might be, I think is a fair assessment.
A move that has sparked worries among students who are planning to apply to universities in the United States. The Trump administration has ordered embassies to stop scheduling appointments for student visas as it prepares to expand social media vetting of applicants. According to reports, an internal memo sent to all diplomatic missions, signed by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, says that there will be a pause on all appointments until further guidance is issued. The memo says that social media vetting would have to be stepped up for student and foreign exchange visas. CNBC TV 18 reached out to the US Embassy in Delhi to confirm this and also for a response. The spokesperson said that the State Department does not comment on internal communications, but all visa applicants may continue submitting applications. When it comes to scheduling of non-immigrant visa interview appointments, the US Embassy in Delhi said that the situation is dynamic and depends on the time required for consular officers to adjudicate cases before them for full compliance with the US law. Consular officials will be working to ensure that applicants don't pose a risk to the United States. Also, consular officials constantly adjust schedules to make sure they have sufficient time to vet cases before them. We also learned that US State Department has been asking visa applicants to provide their social media handles on both immigrant and non-immigrant visa application forms since 2019. Now, just for context, in 2023-24, the total number of international students in the US increased by 7% to a record high of 1.1 million students. Indian students accounted for 29% of total enrollments and were the largest international student community. Their numbers increased by 23% over 2023. International students accounted for 5.9% of the total US higher education population of 18 million students. According to a report by the Association of International Educators, international students at colleges and universities in the US contributed $44 billion to the US economy during the 2023-2024 academic year and supported more than 378,000 jobs.
It is certainly the sovereign right of every country to decide who they should grant the visa to. But that having been said, the expectation is that when students go to universities, it's not just the subject that they're learning. They are participating in a certain campus atmosphere of expression of opinion, free speech, interacting with each other, learning from each other, learning from the different discourses that are brought to the table. Now, this kind of attempt would suggest that the kind of free expression that US was known for earlier, for some time, there's going to be restriction on that.
But let's now delve deeper into the issue. How will the Trump administration's latest crackdown impact prospects of Indian students eyeing a seat in American universities? Remember, Indians account for 30% of the international student community in the United States. Shilpa joins us now for a quick pulse check. Shilpa, you've been speaking with experts. What are they telling you about where this now leaves students who have already applied, have been granted admission as well, and may well be facing an uncertain future?
Well, you know, the pause on the new student visa interviews has caused somewhat of a panic amongst prospective students in India who have already secured admissions and are set to start college in August to September. Now, most of these students would have already finished their admission process, their loan documentation, and just have the student visa application process left. Now, we spoke to some education consultants, some students and parents, and the sense that we're getting is that students and parents are worried that not getting the student visa at this juncture would mean that they will have to defer their admission by a semester or even take a gap year. Because, you know, at this point in time, it is also too late to consider other options in other countries unless you already have backups. Because in other countries, most deadlines for college applications, especially in Europe, etc., have already passed. Now, all overseas education consultants are also now advising all prospective students to keep their social media profiles, what they call, clean, and to avoid any political commentary, to avoid any issues with the visa going forward. Now, even students who are already studying in the US are also anxious and fearful of any behavior actions that could be deemed as potentially violating visa norms, and also about their careers after finishing college amongst this current situation. And as for students who are still in their planning stages, consultants say that many parents are now inquiring about colleges in other countries like UK and Australia, citing lower risk and better stability. Now, why this is significant is, like my colleague pointed out, that Indians at 29.4% account for the highest number of international students, and this is followed by China and Korea. Now, currently, there are about 3.3 lakh Indian students who are studying in the US as well, and this is a number that has been consistently growing over years. And despite uncertainties, US is still the most preferred destination for overseas education, and many consultants say that this uncertainty is largely temporary in nature. Now, my colleague Reema Tendulkar spoke to an educational consultant, Viral Doshi, about this. Listen in.
US colleges depend on international students, both financially and for the well-being of the university. So it has to be sorted out. Not even the embassies know what is going to happen. So it's going to be something that's going to come out from the administration. And it will be a question of time. So be patient. And I'm sure the patient will be rewarded by interviews in the next 2 months. Nothing to worry. This sort of issue, what they're looking at, of looking at policy on social media, I'm sure will be sorted out. I'm quite confident of that. Because as much as we want to go to a good university, they also want good students. And also remember, it's not only impacting us in India, it's impacting all over the world.
And staying with the United States, students of Harvard University held a protest against the Trump administration's crackdown. Hundreds of students were seen gathered inside the university after the U.S. government announced that it will cancel all federal contracts worth $100 million with the university. They were also protesting Trump's move to block the enrollment of all international students. Remember, the university sued the Trump administration last week after they were given 72 hours to respond to a list of demands laid out by the Department of Homeland Security. U.S. Education Secretary Linda McMahon has said that President Trump may look to increase the endowment tax on Harvard University.
President Trump has a real knack for tapping into what a lot of people in the country, as you said, many parts of the country might look at and go, wait a second. They have a $53 billion endowment, and yet my tax dollars are going for about $9 billion right now. And when you look at these endowments, $53 billion at Harvard, that endowment doesn't sit still. It's invested. And if it can have a return of 5, 7, maybe sometimes 10% on that endowment, that's billions of dollars, that's maybe, as the president is looking to increase the endowment tax, that's something that the American public could wrap its head around.
Well, that's the latest, the battle between the Trump administration, Harvard University, and, of course, other colleges at this point in time on accepting international students. Now, an interim trade agreement between India and the U.S. may be finalized in the last week of June. This development comes after Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal visited the U.S. earlier this month to bolster trade ties between the two nations. The director of the U.S. National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, has said that he met Indian officials. The deal is close to the finish line.
I won't talk about a specific country, but I have been meeting with Indian officials. I had dinner with the ambassador a little while ago, and I think, and JD went over there and made a huge amount of progress. Thank goodness for the vice president. So yeah, I would say that it's one of the ones that's on the list of it's close to the finish line.
Well, that's Kevin Hassett saying close to the finish line about the India-US trade deal. Meanwhile, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri met US Undersecretary Jeffrey Kessler to boost cooperation in critical and emerging technologies. The two officials also discussed early convening of the India-US Strategic Trade Dialogue to deepen tech and trade collaboration. Misri is in the US till the 29th of May. Let's talk about the market action. Markets have seen minor cuts after a range-bound session. The Nifty closing below 24,800. The Nifty Bank, though, closing in the green. The Sensex closed flat, about 239 points lower. So not too much going on by way of the markets today. But shares of ITC slipping in early trade today. This after British American Tobacco sold 2.57% equity in the company. The transaction is worth over 12,000 crore rupees at an average price of around 400 rupees per share. BAT has said that the proceeds of the sale will provide greater financial flexibility to the company. BAT will continue to hold 23% in ITC. Former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan says that it is India's moment to capitalize on shifts in global supply chains as companies search for longer-term opportunities. Speaking exclusively to CNBC TV 18, Rajan said that India can seize the opportunity by laying out the red carpet to draw foreign direct investment with proactive policies.
It could be India's moment. I think that certainly all supply chains are being reinvestigated by the firms that run them. And if India can put out the red carpet and say, we will have a predictable tax and policy regime, we will allow you to also produce for the domestic market, and don't worry about the pushback from Indian industry, which feels threatened. We will make sure these policies are in place for the foreseeable future. It could result in a significant increase in foreign direct investment. And it should use the negotiations to advantage, not simply be driven by the incentive to protect certain segments of Indian industry, but to make Indian industry much more competitive globally and take advantage of this moment in that way.
Well, that's the former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan. Now, SEBI has passed an ex parte interim order in the IndusInd insider trading case. The market regulator has found prima facie violations by 5 bank executives, including the former CEO Sumant Katpalia. SEBI has ordered impounding of nearly 20 crore rupees and has barred 5 executives from the market till further orders. Ritu standing by now with more details from the SEBI order. What does this now mean, Ritu, as far as IndusInd Bank itself is concerned, and of course the 5 individuals named?
Well, Shireen, 2 of those 5 individuals have already exited the bank, the former CEO and the former deputy CEO, but 3 others do still remain, including Mr. Anil Rao, who is very much part of the executive committee that has been approved by the Reserve Bank of India to run the bank's operations in the interim until a new CEO is found. So this is going to have significant repercussions for the bank and the way the management is running at the moment in the absence of the CEO. But that said, SEBI's interim order says it started investigations on the 10th of March, which is when the bank had first disclosed these discrepancies in its book. And now in this interim order, it has barred the former MD and CEO Sumant Katpalia, the former deputy CEO Arun Khurana, and 3 others for alleged insider trading. Now, the interim order, of course, is still pending the conclusion of the investigation, which is still ongoing. But in the meantime, what SEBI has done is it has impounded the bank accounts of these 5 people to the extent of, the expected loss on account of insider trading. And that includes Arun Khurana, who's the deputy CEO, to the extent of 14.4 crores, the largest amount by far. The biggest allegation of insider trading, therefore, is against the former deputy CEO Arun Khurana, followed by Sumant Katpalia, about 5.2 crores, Sushant Saurav, 7.14 crores, Rohan Jatana, about 6.87 crores, and Anil Rao, who's on the executive committee, of 3.94 lakhs. The Rohan Jatana and Anil Rao's amounts are, of course, in lakhs. So the total likely disgorgement amount as of now is about 19.78 crore rupees. In the order, SEBI has barred all of these 5 personnel from buying, selling or dealing in securities directly or indirectly, and restrained them from making any deposits or debits in their bank accounts without SEBI's prior permission, and also asked them to provide a full inventory of all of their assets. The detailed examination by SEBI with respect to insider trading against all of these individuals and other suspects, which it did not name, is still ongoing, and that investigation is now going to be expedited. But we do expect more to come out of this. Keep in mind, the Grant Thornton report is also now going to be sent to SEBI, which deals with a lot of this insider trading allegation.
Ritu, many thanks for joining us. That is the interim ex parte order in the insider trading matter pertaining to IndusInd Bank that has been issued by the regulator SEBI. And staying with SEBI, the Central Anti-Corruption Ombudsman has refused to probe the complaints of corruption against former SEBI chief Madhabi Puri Butch and her husband Dhaval Butch. The complaint against them were filed by TMC MP Maua Moitra and 2 other lawmakers on the basis of the allegations in the Hindenburg report. Now, Ashmit is standing by to explain to us what the Lokpal has said. Ashmit.
Well, the prayer that had been sought by the complainant is that there needs to be an investigation under the Prevention of Corruption Act. The finding that the Lokpal has given at the end of this brief order, it's not very long, about 36 odd pages. Here what the Lokpal says is that some of the allegations that have come are bordering frivolous, that they have not been substantiated with facts, and therefore, as a result, no fit case, no grounds have been made out for launching an investigation. And in doing so, Lokpal granting relief to Madhabi Puri Butch, the former SEBI chief. Now, what's important is that these complainants had raised multiple issues with respect to conflict of interest, with respect to quid pro quo. They had flagged her investments that she had made in certain funds that were linked to the Adani Group. There were questions regarding quid pro quo being raised regarding consultancy income, regarding rental income, with respect to sale of her ESOPs from her ICICI Bank days. Now, on all of those questions, the finding that the Lokpal has given is that a bulk of these charges and questions that have been raised on the back of the Hindenburg report, which came in context of Adani Enterprises. Having said that, what the Lokpal concludes is that that report alone by a US-based short seller is not grounds enough for escalation into a probe. There has to be other criteria that has to be met. But unfortunately, what the Lokpal says is that those criteria have not been met, going on to say that the allegations are untenable, they're unsubstantiated, they're bordering frivolity, they're presumptuous, and also then finally going on to say that there is no verifiable material to back those allegations, to back those questions. So on that count, Lokpal making it clear, no fit case, made out for launching an investigation under the Prevention of Corruption Act.
Okay, so no investigation ordered by the Lokpal. Ashmit, appreciate you joining us. Relief coming in for former SEBI chief Madhavi Puri Butch. Now, we told you first, and it is now official, Hero FinCorp has secured SEBI's approval for its 3,700 crore rupee IPO. The market regulator is also set to clear 2 more major IPOs. Sources tell us that this includes HDB Financial's 12,500 crore rupee issue, which could be the largest NBFC listing in recent times. Vikram Solar is also likely to receive SEBI's go-ahead for an IPO soon. The public issue of luxury hotel group Schloss Bangalore, which owns the Leela brand, was fully subscribed on the final day after Lucrom response. In the first 2 days, the issue was subscribed nearly 5 times. This was led by qualified institutional buyers, which was subscribed over 7 times. The non-institutional investors and retail quota not fully subscribed. And staying with IPOs, Aegis Vopak was also fully subscribed on the last day of subscription. The issue was led by qualified institutional buyers, which was subscribed over 3 times. However, the retail and NII portion witnessed poor demand and was not fully subscribed. Up next, the co-founder of the edtech firm Unacademy are set to exit the company. Sources say Gaurav Munjal and Roman Saini are in talks with the board to spin off the language learning app AirLearn as a separate company. That and more when we return. And you can catch all of CNBC TV's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X and Jio Hotstar. India's industrial output in April grew at a slower rate compared to March. The index of industrial production grew by 2.7% on a yearly basis in April. This is the slowest pace of growth in 8 months. Manufacturing, which is the largest component on the index, saw an expansion. Electricity production suffered a slowdown. Mining activity saw a contraction in April. The government has hiked the minimum support price for Kharif crops by 7% year-on-year. The MSP of ragi has seen the highest increase of 14%. The government has also imposed stock limits on wheat. The changes will be effective from the upcoming Kharif season, which begins with the onset of the monsoon in June. International law firm CMS has announced that Indian law firm Indus Law has become one of its member firms. The new entity, CMS Indus Law, plans to complete onboarding by the end of 2025. Indus Law will remain an independent law firm under the CMS brand. CMS is an international organization of independent law firms with over 6,800 lawyers in 45 countries. So an important development there in India's legal space. Fashion app Myntra has received fresh funding of over 1,000 crore rupees from its parent entity, FK Myntra Holdings. Over 19 crore shares of Myntra Designs have been allotted to FK Myntra Holdings at an issue price of 5,465 rupees each. Now, the co-founders of edtech firm Unacademy are set to exit the company. Sources tell us that Gaurav Munjal and Roman Saini are in talks with the board to spin off the language learning app AirLearn as a separate company. Rachna is standing by to explain what this means for Unacademy and for the founders and, of course, investors as well. Rachna.
Well, Unacademy, once a poster child of India's edtech boom, is in the middle of a massive reset, both in leadership and strategy. Co-founder Gaurav Munjal is set to step down as CEO, and fellow co-founder Roman Saini will also be exiting from his operational duties. The baton now passes to Sumit Jain as Unacademy pivots sharply from its online test prep roots to offline learning centers and a spin-off for language learning app AirLearn, where the co-founders will now assume a new role. This change comes after a turbulent 2-year stretch. The company laid off nearly 1,400 employees, including senior leadership, and lost both its COO and CFO between 2021 and 2023. Despite marquee backers like Bloom, Tiger Global, Temasek, SoftBank, Nexus Ventures, Facebook, it hasn't raised fresh capital since August 2021, when it was last valued at about $3.44 billion. But that valuation may also be in trouble now. Sources say Unacademy was in bailout talks with Allen, PhysicsWallah, K12 Techno, Veranda Learnings over these last 2 years at a possible valuation of just $800 million. That's almost a 77% drop. The cap table reveals Unacademy's global appeal at its peak. 13 funding rounds, $880 million raised, 42 investors, and over 75% held by institutional investors. So where did it all go wrong? Unacademy had about 13 to 15 acquisitions, many of which are now shut or dormant, and then the funding winter struck. Munjal had assured that the company will narrow its focus, and so even online test prep, which made Unacademy a household name, has now been sidelined. While Gaurav Munjal tweeted in July last year claiming that this would be Unacademy's best year yet, the ground reality tells a much more complex story about the company, indicating further complexities at his sudden departure.
All right, Rachna, many thanks for joining us. The founders on their way out at Unacademy. Now, we're chasing legacy, not valuation, say the founders of Walmart-backed fintech firm PhonePe. Speaking exclusively to me on our special show, Young Turks Reloaded, the co-founders Samir Nigam and Rahul Chari said that they aim to build a digital conglomerate. Take a look.
If I could pick up on what both of you are saying and the example that you gave of how we've seen this conglomerate model as far as large legacy companies are concerned, is that the ambition of creating a digital conglomerate? I mean, the organizational structure certainly seems to suggest so.
I mean, I think one thing that both of us and a third co-founder, Boris, and we're very clear about, when we started PhonePe, this was not our first gig together. This is a second or third stint together. And we're old entrepreneurs, so we said, we want to build a legacy company. We don't want to be valuation chasers. We want to be legacy chasers, in that, like, we want to create an institution that outlasts us. Multi-generational is not a word you hear in the consumer tech space.
No, you
anymore.
don't.
So we said we want to try and do
a
that.
multi-generational great company.
Yeah. In the consumer tech sector, how many are there? In India, we've not seen too many yet. It's also early innings. But I think the VC model and multi-generational don't go hand to hand in a market like ours, because promoters get diluted out very early.
Yeah.
And on the other side, the cash burn to actually cater to 1 billion people is also very high. I mean, it's both. Here, that's one of the reasons why capital efficiency is a key focus for us.
And you can watch that entire conversation at 6 p.m. tomorrow on our program, Young Turks Reloaded. Israeli forces continue to bombard Gaza, killing at least 8 people. This has taken the total death toll to 15 since dawn. Israeli military has also opened fire on crowds who rushed to an aid point run by the controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. At least 3 people were killed and 46 injured at the scene. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that Hamas Gaza chief Mohammed Sinwar has been killed. Israel had targeted Sinwar in an airstrike at a hospital in southern Gaza on the 12th of May. He was the younger brother of the group's deceased leader, Yahya Sinwar. Russia said that major Ukrainian drone attacks on Moscow led to the suspension of flights from 2 airports. The defense ministry said 112 Ukrainian drones targeted 6 different regions in the 3 hours up to midnight. Meanwhile, Russian drones hit the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, injuring 8 people. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. From all of us here, thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. We're back in a minute.